Memphis, Tennessee. October 18, 1956, screaming fans mobbed Elvis Presley at a gas station, blocking pumps and disrupting business. The furious manager confronted him. Police were called. The situation spiraled into a legal battle that could have destroyed reputations, until Elvis did something in court that changed everything. It was October 18, 1956, a Thursday afternoon in Memphis. Elvis Presley, now 21 years old and exploding into superstardom, needed gas. Heartbreak Hotel had hit #1. He'd just performed on The Ed Sullivan Show. His face was everywhere, and so were his fans. Elvis pulled into Patterson's service station on Lamar Avenue around 3 p.m. It was a busy station, 4 pumps, constantly active, serving the working-class neighborhood efficiently. Within seconds of Elvis parking at pump number 2, teenage girls in a nearby car started screaming. Then another carload of teenagers pulled in specifically because they'd spotted the pink Cadillac they'd seen in magazines. Within 5 minutes, there were 15 cars in the lot, not for gas, but to see Elvis Presley. Elvis, gracious as always, rolled down his window and started signing autographs. He was smiling, joking, completely unaware that he was about to be at the center of a confrontation that would make headlines across the country. Frank Patterson, the station manager, watched from his office window as the chaos unfolded. Pumps were blocked. Customers who actually needed gas couldn't get through. Teenage girls were screaming so loud that people 3 blocks away came to see what was happening. Frank had been managing this station for 8 years. He'd built a reputation for efficient service and keeping order, and now this rock and roll singer was turning his workplace into a circus. What Frank did next ignited everything. The confrontation. Frank stormed out of his office toward Elvis's Cadillac. He was a big man, 6'2", 240 pounds, with the build of someone who'd worked manual labor his entire life, and he was furious. "You!" Frank shouted, pointing at Elvis. "You need to leave, now!" Elvis looked up from signing an autograph book, still smiling. "Yes, sir, I just need some gas, and then—" "I don't care what you need," Frank interrupted. "Look at this mess. You've got fans blocking 3 of my 4 pumps. I've got customers waiting on Lamar Avenue who can't even pull in. You're costing me money every second you sit here." The crowd went quiet. The teenage girls stopped screaming and started looking nervous. Elvis kept his voice calm and respectful. "I understand, sir. I apologize for the disruption. If you'd like, I can ask everyone to—" "I don't want you to ask anything. I want you to get out of my station." One of Elvis's fans, a 17-year-old named Betty Anderson, shouted back, "He has a right to get gas just like anyone else." "This isn't about rights," Frank yelled. "This is about my business. These pumps are for paying customers, not for autograph sessions." More fans started shouting in Elvis's defense. Frank's 2 employees, nervous about the escalating situation, came out of the service bays to see what was happening. Elvis tried again. "Mr. Patterson, how do you know my name?" Frank demanded, even angrier now. "It's on your shirt, sir," Elvis said quietly, gesturing to Frank's embroidered work shirt. "Look, I really am sorry about this. I didn't mean to cause problems. Let me just—" But Frank wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed Elvis by the arm and tried to pull him out of the car. That's when everything exploded. The incident. The moment Frank grabbed Elvis's arm, several things happened at once. 3 teenage boys in the crowd rushed forward to protect Elvis, pushing Frank back. Frank shoved one of them hard, and the boy fell against a pump. A girl screamed. More fans surged forward, not attacking, but creating a wall between Frank and Elvis. Frank's 2 employees, seeing their boss in the middle of a hostile crowd, grabbed tools from the service bay. A tire iron, a wrench. Not to use them, but to look threatening enough to make the crowd back off. Elvis jumped out of his Cadillac, hands up, shouting, "Stop! Everyone stop! This isn't helping!" But the chaos had its own momentum now. Cars were honking on Lamar Avenue. Someone knocked over a trash can. A customer trying to leave clipped a parked car with his bumper in the confusion. Frank, now genuinely scared that he was about to be attacked by a mob of teenagers, did what seemed like the only option. He called the police. Within minutes, 2 Memphis Police Department patrol cars arrived, sirens wailing. And that's when the situation went from bad to disastrous. The police arrive officers, James Riley and Thomas Mitchell, arrived to find absolute chaos. Cars blocking the station entrance, teenagers everywhere, the manager red-faced and shouting, and Elvis Presley in the middle of it all trying to calm people down. "All right, everyone back," Officer Riley shouted. "Clear this area now." The crowd, faced with police authority, immediately started dispersing. Cars began pulling out, teenagers scattered, and within 10 minutes the station was nearly empty. Elvis stood by his Cadillac looking exhausted and frustrated. Frank Patterson, still furious, pointed at Elvis. "I want to file a complaint. This man disrupted my business, caused a public disturbance, and his fans assaulted me." "I didn't assault anyone," Elvis said quietly. "And I didn't tell my fans to—" "You're a public figure," Frank interrupted. "You're responsible for what your fans do." Officer Riley looked at Elvis, then at Frank, then at the mess around them. "Mr. Patterson, did Elvis Presley personally assault you?" "No." "But did he threaten you?" "No, but his fans. So you want to file a complaint about his fans, not about him?" "He caused the whole thing by being here," Frank insisted. Officer Mitchell had been taking notes. Now he looked at Elvis. "Mr. Presley, did you know your presence here would cause this kind of disruption?" Elvis hesitated. How was he supposed to answer that? Yes, he knew fans got excited when they saw him. But he needed gas like anyone else. Was he supposed to never stop at public places? "I didn't intend for this to happen, officer," Elvis said carefully. "I just needed gas." "But it happened anyway," Officer Mitchell said. "And property was damaged. That customer's car that got hit, that's going to be a claim. Someone's going to have to pay for it." Frank saw an opening. "And I lost business, at least an hour of business while this circus was going on." Officer Riley sighed. This was turning into a nightmare of paperwork. "Mr. Presley, I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station and make a statement." "Am I being arrested?" Elvis asked, his face pale. "No, but there may be civil claims against you, and we need your statement on record." The situation that had started with Elvis just needing gas was about to become a legal battle. The court case. On November 2nd, 1956, just 15 days after the gas station incident, Elvis found himself in Memphis Municipal Court facing a lawsuit. Frank Patterson was suing Elvis for $500 in damages and lost business. The customer whose car had been hit was suing Elvis for $200 in vehicle repairs, and the city was charging Elvis with creating a public nuisance. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, knowing this would make great headlines. Rock and roll star sued over fan riot, or Elvis's fans cause chaos, singer faces court. Elvis sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, looking young and worried. This wasn't supposed to be his life. He just wanted to make music and treat his fans well. Now he was in court, being blamed for a situation he hadn't created and couldn't control. Frank Patterson took the stand first, describing the chaos, the blocked pumps, the lost business, the fear he'd felt when the crowd surrounded him. "Did Mr. Presley personally threaten you?" Elvis's lawyer asked during cross-examination. "No, but did Mr. Presley encourage his fans to block the pumps?" "He was signing autographs. He was encouraging them to stay." "So being kind to fans who approached him is the same as encouraging them to disrupt business?" "When you're Elvis Presley, yes," Frank said. "He knows what happens when he stops anywhere public. He should know better." The customer whose car was hit testified next, describing the chaos and confusion, the damage to his vehicle. Then it was Elvis's turn to testify. What Elvis said in court that day became the turning point. Elvis took the stand nervous but determined. His lawyer asked him to describe what happened from his perspective. "I needed gas," Elvis said simply. "I've been going to gas stations my whole life. I didn't think it would be different this time." "But you knew you were famous," the prosecutor interrupted. "You knew people would recognize you." "Yes, sir," Elvis admitted. "But I didn't know it would cause problems. I've stopped at gas stations before without any trouble. This time, I don't know, there were more people than usual. And when the crowd gathered, what did you do?" "I tried to be polite. People were excited to see me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I signed some autographs." "While blocking Mr. Patterson's pumps?" "I didn't realize the pumps were blocked at first. When Mr. Patterson told me, I tried to get everyone to move. I was trying to help fix the situation." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Mr. Presley, don't you think someone in your position has a responsibility to avoid situations like this, to think ahead about the consequences of stopping at public places?" Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that silenced the entire courtroom. "Yes, sir, I do think I have that responsibility now. But here's what I don't understand. Where am I supposed to go? If I can't stop at gas stations, where do I get gas? If I can't go to restaurants, where do I eat? If I can't go to stores, where do I shop? Am I supposed to just hide? Stay home all the time?" His voice cracked slightly with emotion. "I'm 21 years old. A year ago I was driving a truck and living in a housing project. Now I'm being sued for getting gas. I didn't ask for fame to be like this. I just wanted to sing." The courtroom was completely silent. "I'm sorry about what happened at Mr. Patterson's station," Elvis continued. "I really am. I'll pay for the damages. I'll pay for lost business. I'll do whatever I need to do to make it right, but I don't know how to stop being who I am, and I don't know how to control what other people do when they see me." Even the judge seemed moved by Elvis's words. The judge's decision judge, Harold Morrison, had been presiding over Memphis Municipal Court for 15 years. He'd seen thousands of cases: theft, assault, property disputes, traffic violations, but he'd never seen anything quite like this. After hearing all the testimony, Judge Morrison made a decision that surprised everyone. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said, "I'm going to award you $200 for documented lost business and cleanup costs. Mr. Presley will pay this amount." Frank started to smile, thinking he'd won. "However," the judge continued, "I want to say something to both of you and to everyone in this courtroom." He looked at Frank. "Mr. Patterson, I understand your frustration. Your business was disrupted, your day was ruined, and you felt disrespected. But Mr. Presley is right. He has to live in the world like everyone else. He can't be held legally responsible every time someone gets excited to see him. If we set that precedent, we're essentially saying famous people can't participate in normal life. That's not how America works." Then the judge looked at Elvis. "Mr. Presley, you're learning a hard lesson that every public figure has to learn. Your presence has consequences. You need to start thinking ahead. Maybe you need security with you. Maybe you need to use less recognizable vehicles. Maybe you need to go places during off hours. Your lawyer can help you figure out strategies. But you can't just act like a regular person anymore, even though that's unfair." Judge Morrison addressed the entire courtroom. "Fame is complicated. We celebrate it, we create it, we consume it, and then we punish people for having it. Mr. Presley didn't do anything wrong on October 18th. He needed gas. His fans got excited. Things got out of hand. That's not a crime. That's just modern life." The judge banged his gavel. "Case dismissed, with the exception of the $200 damages to be paid to Mr. Patterson. Court adjourned." But the story didn't end in that courtroom. What Elvis did next. 3 days after the court case, Frank Patterson received a package at his gas station. Inside was $500 in cash, $200 for the court-ordered damages, plus an extra $300. There was also a letter in Elvis's handwriting. "Mr. Patterson, I hope this helps make up for the disruption my presence caused at your station. The extra $300 is for the business you lost that I couldn't calculate, and for the stress this whole situation caused you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said and what the judge said. You were right that I should have been more aware of how my presence would affect your business. I'm still learning how to navigate this strange new life where my just existing somewhere can cause problems. I don't want you to think I'm above the rules or that I don't care about regular people trying to do their jobs. My daddy worked hard labor his whole life, and I know what it's like to be on the other side, to be the person just trying to make a living when someone with power or fame makes it harder. I'm going to try to be more thoughtful about where I go and when. Maybe I'll start calling ahead to places, asking when it's less busy. Maybe I need to think about security, like the judge suggested. I don't want to cause problems for people who are just trying to do their jobs. Thank you for teaching me this lesson, even though it wasn't an easy way to learn it. Respectfully, Elvis Presley P.S. If you ever have car trouble and need help, call this number. It's my personal line at Graceland. I mean it. Frank Patterson." Read this letter 3 times, sitting in his office at the gas station, feeling something he hadn't expected to feel: guilt. He'd been so angry, so focused on the disruption and the principle of the thing, that he hadn't really thought about Elvis as a person. A 21-year-old kid who'd become famous almost overnight and was trying to figure out how to live a normal life while being abnormal. Frank picked up the phone and called Graceland. When Elvis answered, Frank said something he'd never expected to say. "Mr. Presley, this is Frank Patterson. I got your letter and your money. I appreciate it, but I want to apologize too. I grabbed your arm that day. I escalated things when I should have just talked to you like a human being. You didn't deserve that." There was a long pause. Then Elvis said quietly, "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Patterson. That means a lot." The gas station incident changed how Elvis approached his public life. After October 18, 1956, Elvis started implementing strategies to avoid similar situations. 1. He began calling ahead to businesses, asking when they were least busy, arranging to come during off hours when fewer customers would be disrupted. 2. He started using different vehicles, not just the famous pink Cadillac, but regular cars that wouldn't immediately identify him. 3. He hired security to manage crowds when he did appear in public places, making sure other people's businesses weren't disrupted. 4. He became more aware of exit strategies, always having a plan for how to leave a location quickly if crowds gathered. But most importantly, Elvis never stopped being kind to his fans. He could have responded to the lawsuit by becoming cold or distant, by blaming fans for getting him into trouble. Instead, he understood that his fans' enthusiasm was a gift, not a burden. He just needed to be smarter about managing it. In a 1957 interview, Elvis reflected on the gas station incident. "That day taught me that being famous means thinking about more than just yourself. When I stop somewhere, I'm not just affecting me, I'm affecting the business owner, the other customers, everyone around. I have a responsibility to think about that. But I also have a responsibility to keep being accessible to my fans, because they're the reason I have this life. It's a balance, and I'm still figuring it out." The impact of that incident rippled out in unexpected ways. Frank Patterson's change of heart. After the phone call with Elvis, Frank Patterson had his own revelation. He'd been so focused on protecting his business that he'd forgotten what it was like to be young, to be struggling, to be trying to figure out your place in the world. Frank started following Elvis's career more closely. He bought his records, he watched him on TV, and he saw something he'd missed that chaotic day at the gas station. Elvis was genuinely kind to everyone, all the time. In December 1956, just 2 months after the incident, Frank did something unexpected. He put up a sign at his gas station, "Elvis Presley, welcome here anytime." When reporters asked him why, Frank said, "Because I was wrong. I treated that young man like he was trying to cause trouble, when really he was just trying to get gas and be nice to his fans. If he comes back, I'll make sure there's a pump available for him, and I'll help manage the crowd myself." Elvis never did come back to Patterson's service station. His lawyer advised against it, worried about liability. But Frank kept that sign up for the next 20 years, until he retired and sold the business. "That sign wasn't really for Elvis," Frank admitted years later. "It was for me. It reminded me every day not to judge people based on one bad moment, not to let anger control my decisions, not to forget that everyone's just trying to figure out their life, whether they're famous or not." But there's an even more powerful lesson in this story: the cost of anger. The gas station incident of October 18, 1956, cost Frank Patterson $200 in court fees and lost wages for the day in court. It cost Elvis $500 in damages and settlements, plus thousands in legal fees. But the real cost wasn't financial, it was human. Frank Patterson spent 3 weeks being angry. 3 weeks stewing over the disruption, the principle, the disrespect he felt. 3 weeks of elevated blood pressure, sleepless nights, strained relationships with his wife and employees who thought he was overreacting. Elvis spent 3 weeks being stressed and hurt, 3 weeks worrying about his reputation, about whether he'd done something wrong, about whether he could ever live a normal life again. All of that pain and stress and anger came from one moment, the moment Frank chose confrontation over communication, escalation over understanding. What would have happened if Frank had approached Elvis calmly that day? If he'd said, "Mr. Presley, I appreciate that you're popular, but your fans are blocking my pumps and disrupting my business. Could you help me manage this situation?" Elvis would have helped. Absolutely, without question, he would have helped. He'd proven throughout his life that he was respectful to working people, that he understood the value of someone's livelihood. But because Frank approached with anger instead of communication, the situation spiraled into chaos, lawsuits, media coverage, and mutual pain. That's the real lesson of this story. How we choose to engage in conflict determines what that conflict becomes. The media response. The Memphis papers covered the gas station incident and court case extensively. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to Elvis, young singer struggles with fame's burden, to critical, rock star's fans create chaos, business owner fights back. But one editorial in the Memphis Press Scimitar captured something important. Written by music journalist Robert Johnson, it read, "The case of Elvis Presley versus Patterson's service station is really about all of us. We created Elvis's fame. We bought his records, screamed at his concerts, and followed him everywhere. Then we punished him for having the fame we gave him. Frank Patterson had every right to be frustrated. His business was disrupted through no fault of his own. But Elvis Presley also had every right to get gas. He didn't ask his fans to mob the station. He was just living his life." This case reveals an uncomfortable truth. We don't really know how to handle fame in America. We create celebrities, we worship them, and then we resent them for the problems their celebrity creates. We want them to be accessible and normal, but we punish them when their presence disrupts normal life. Maybe the lesson here is for all of us. If you see Elvis Presley, or any famous person, in public, remember they're just trying to get gas or buy groceries or live their life. Your enthusiasm is understandable, but your restraint is necessary. Because the alternative is that famous people will stop being accessible at all, and we'll all be poorer for it. This editorial was reprinted in newspapers across the country and sparked a national conversation about fame, privacy, and public space. And that conversation changed how America thought about celebrities. The October 1956 gas station incident became a case study in how fame and normal life intersect. Law schools studied it when discussing public figures' rights and responsibilities. Business schools used it to teach crisis management and customer service under unusual circumstances. But more importantly, it changed how other celebrities handled public appearances. After Elvis's case, managers and lawyers started advising their famous clients to use private entrances when possible, travel with security to manage crowds, call businesses ahead to coordinate public visits, have exit strategies for every public appearance. These practices, now standard for every celebrity, started with Elvis's painful lesson at Patterson's service station. Frank Patterson's son, Michael, who was 12 years old in 1956, went on to become a conflict resolution mediator. He spent 40 years helping people resolve disputes without litigation, always telling his clients, "I watched my father sue Elvis Presley over something that could have been solved with a conversation. Don't make that same mistake." Michael wrote a book in 1998 called The Elvis Principle, Choosing Communication Over Conflict. In it, he details his father's case and the lessons both men learned from it. "My father taught me something important," Michael wrote, "not from what he did right, but from what he did wrong. He chose anger over understanding. He chose escalation over communication, and it cost him 3 weeks of peace, thousands in historien, legal fees, and the chance to have a positive interaction with someone who turned out to be genuinely kind. That's a lesson I've carried my entire career. And there's one final detail that brings this story full circle. The final meeting. In 1975, 19 years after the gas station incident, Frank Patterson was diagnosed with heart disease. He was 65 years old, facing surgery with uncertain outcomes. Frank wrote one last letter to Elvis. "Dear Elvis, you probably don't remember me. I'm the gas station manager who sued you in 1956 over that crowd situation. You sent me $500 and a kind letter. I never properly thanked you for that. I'm writing now because I'm facing heart surgery and there's a chance I won't make it through. I wanted to tell you something while I still can. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for grabbing your arm that day. I'm sorry for escalating the situation. I'm sorry for taking you to court over something that wasn't your fault. You were just a kid trying to get gas and be kind to your fans. I was a middle-aged man who let anger control my decisions. You responded to my anger with grace and generosity, and I've thought about that many times over the years. My son became a mediator because of our case. He helps hundreds of people every year avoid the mistake I made, choosing conflict over communication. So something good came from my bad decision, I suppose. If this is my last chance to say it, I want you to know, you're a good man, Elvis. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, even though I fought against learning it at the time. With respect and apology, Frank Patterson." Elvis received this letter in April 1975. According to Priscilla Presley, Elvis read it and immediately called Graceland staff. "Find out where Frank Patterson is. I want to visit him." Elvis went to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis and spent an hour with Frank before his surgery, just talking about life, about mistakes, about forgiveness, about second chances. Frank's wife Mary was there and later described the visit. "Elvis held my husband's hand and told him there was nothing to forgive. He said everyone does things they regret when they're angry or scared. He told Frank that the letter he'd sent 19 years ago had taught Elvis to be more aware and thoughtful, and that made him a better person. He thanked Frank for that." Frank Patterson survived his surgery and lived another 12 years. He kept a photo from that hospital visit on his bedside table until he died in 1907. A photo of him and Elvis, both smiling, two men who'd been on opposite sides of a conflict, learning to see each other as human beings. The story of Elvis and the gas station manager isn't just about one chaotic afternoon in 1956. It's about how anger escalates, how communication fails, and how the smallest conflicts can spiral into something that consumes everyone involved. Frank Patterson made a choice that October day to approach Elvis with anger instead of communication. That choice led to chaos, police involvement, a lawsuit, media attention, and stress for everyone involved. But here's what makes this story matter. Both men learned from it. Elvis learned to be more thoughtful about how his fame affected others. He started implementing strategies to avoid disrupting people's businesses. He never stopped being kind to fans, but he became smarter about managing that kindness in public spaces. Frank learned that anger costs more than it's worth. That escalation rarely solves problems. That treating someone as human instead of as an obstacle changes everything. Think about this. How many conflicts in your life started because someone approached with anger instead of communication? How many situations spiraled out of control because escalation felt justified in the moment? What would happen if you chose differently? If you approached conflict with curiosity instead of anger? If you asked, how can we solve this, instead of who's to blame? The gas station incident cost both men time, money, and peace. But it didn't have to. A simple conversation could have solved everything. Mr. Presley, your fans are wonderful, but they're blocking my business. Can you help me manage this? And Elvis would have said yes, because that's who he was. That's the lesson. How we choose to engage determines what happens next. Elvis froze on stage once as a child, and someone chose to believe in him. At that gas station in 1956, Frank Patterson chose anger, and it cost him peace. But years later, both men chose forgiveness, and it gave them something far more valuable: understanding. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove how we respond to conflict defines who we become. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that anger escalates, but communication solves. And the next time you face a conflict, ask yourself, do I want to be right, or do I want to resolve this? Because that's what maturity looks like: choosing resolution over righteousness, understanding over anger, and communication over conflict. That's the real legacy of October 18, 1956.